Okay, folks, this week, business organizations, how it is that businesses organize themselves. So we have different ways of looking at this, but it's primarily according to how many owners a particular business has. So we have sole proprietorships, we have partnerships, and we have corporations. Now I'm going to split this up into a few different presentations. I'm going to put it in the module as one gigantic PowerPoint, but as far as going through it in these videos, I'm going to break it up some in order to make it a little bit shorter, otherwise it'd just be embarrassingly long. Okay. So business organization, what is it? Well, it's a profit-seeking enterprise that produces goods or services or carries on commercial enterprise. Basically, it is something there to make profit for the owners, shareholders, and investors of that particular business. That is why it exists. That is why it is there. It is not there for the purpose of providing a good or service to you. Now, it may provide a good or service, but the reason it's doing that is to make a profit for the people who own it. Okay, so providing a good or service is the means towards the end of making a profit. The reason the person undertook the risk of creating the business and invested their money in creating the business and committed their time to it is because they want to get something out of it, and that something would be profit. All right, so a business receives revenue for the things that it sells. Now, the difference between revenue and profit is that revenue is the total amount of money that's coming in. So in the example here, let's say that I start a burger place in Rockwall, one of, like 35 different places you can buy burgers, but let's say I start a new one. I sell that burger to you for $5. That means that I made $5 in revenue. Okay, my revenue was $5 because that's what I sold the burger for. My total amount of money coming in, $5. But let's say that it cost me $4 just to get that burger on your plate. As far as the amount of money I had to spend in order to get the burger and the buns and the napkins and the plate and paying for my employees and the lease and all this other stuff, it cost me $4 just to get that burger to you. So I sold it to you for $5. It cost me $4 to get it to you. So that means that my profit was $1. Profit is the amount of money that is left over from the revenue after you take away costs. Okay? So I sold it to you for $5. I get $5 in revenue. It cost me $4 to get it to you. So therefore I kept $1, and that $1 is the profit. Now, if you ever heard the term profit margin is asking of the total revenue, what percentage of the revenue was profit? In this case, $1 out of 5 counted as profit, so therefore it would be a 20% profit margin, okay, which isn't too bad as far as profit margins go. Okay, now the three types of business organizations we're going to be looking at: sole proprietorships, partnerships, and corporations. What distinguishes among the three? Well, the number of owners. Sole proprietorship, you only have one owner of the business. And by the way, it doesn't matter how big they are or how many employees they have or how much money they make. That's not what distinguishes among these three. It's the number of owners. Okay? So sole proprietorship, you only have one owner. And it's right there in the name. A proprietor is a business owner. Sole means one. So sole proprietorship literally means one business owner. Okay. With partnership, you can have 2 or more owners. It doesn't just have to be 2. You could have 3, 4, who knows. You could have 20 different partners. Okay, so a partnership is just 2 or more owners. And then a corporation is when you have many, many owners. Typically a corporation, well not even typically, a corporation does sell stock and shares in its company, and you have many people who own shares in that company. If you own a share or you own stock in that company, that means you own a little piece of the company. All right, so you have lots of different owners of that. So again, how many owners do you have? Sole proprietorship 1, partnership 2 or more, corporations lots. Okay. Now, this graphic right here just shows you the percentage of firms that are out there compared to the sales. So what you'll notice is corporations make up a minority as far as number of firms go, but they make up the vast majority of the sales. Partnerships are right there in the middle, and then sole proprietorships are most of the businesses, but they make up a small percentage of the sales. That just has to do with size. You imagine Walmart compared to all the mom and pop places out there, or let's say you have McDonald's compared to all the Joe Willie's type places out there. So you have lots of sole proprietorships, but the corporations are the ones that make a lot of the sales. It's just because they're so large and they have the economy of scale. This pie chart series right here kind of shows the same thing. So the corporations are the green, the orange are the sole proprietorships, and then you got blue as the partnerships. So going from right to left, let's start with the right one. So you have the number of businesses out there. Again, you see the sole proprietorships make up the most. And then you got partnerships, and then you got the corporations make up a smaller slice at 19%. But as far as net income goes, and think of this as being the profit, you see the corporations make up the vast amount, right? And then you have partnerships making up a decent chunk there at 23%, and the sole proprietorships are standing right there at 10%. Okay, and then over there on the left side, that left pie graph, you see the overall revenue, overall sales they make. Again, corporations make up the smallest percentage, but they definitely do well for themselves. All right. So sole proprietorships, let's talk about those. As we just saw, it's the most common form, most numerous. You only have one owner of that particular business. And it's relatively easy to form. There's still some things you got to go through. You have to get a tax ID number from the IRS. Typically, you have a few state forms you have to apply for. Maybe need a business license. Ooh, you got to register a name for your business. Make sure it's not taken by somebody else. It's not infringing upon somebody else's trademark. Right? For example, you can't start a food place called McDonald's pancakes or something like that, because that would have confusion with, the big McDonald's. You might need site permits. Depending on the businesses involved, you might have to have other additional business licenses. But generally speaking, you get up and running fairly quickly. It's not going to be that onerous a task in order to get a sole proprietorship going. As far as what you need, well, it depends on the business. You may not even need a storefront in order to get a sole proprietorship going. Maybe you're doing a web design place. Well, you need a computer and you need your office, so you could go in fairly easily with that. Now, advantages of being a sole proprietorship. First of all, like I just said, it's relatively easy to form. It's just you, nobody else, so you start up that business. If you want to end it at some point in the future, it's also relatively easy because it's just you. You don't have to negotiate with anybody else. You don't need to worry about partnerships and splitting up the assets and any of that business. You start it up when you're making money, you can end it and when you're not making money or you get tired of it or whatever. All right. Another advantage is you don't share the profit. All the money that the business is making is yours. You got to keep it all. You don't have to share it with anybody else. You lucky thing. Okay. You also don't pay special tax, and what it means by this, with this special tax, is double taxation. You only pay taxes on the profit once. This also works out that way with partnerships. With corporations, it doesn't. We'll get there a little bit later. But you do not pay double taxation with a sole proprietorship. Okay, it's relatively quick and responsive. If the nature of the business landscape changes, you can make decisions quickly and act upon them because it's you. You're the owner. You're the boss. You don't have to work with anybody else or have anybody else giving their input that you have to listen to anyway. So you can be much quicker and responsive to changes within a business than what a larger entity or a larger business could be. Yep. You have fewer regulations you have to abide by from the government, fewer rules the business has to operate by. There's also less government scrutiny, right? If you're just one little business owner, well, as long as you're paying your taxes, that's usually what counts, and abiding by some other local regulations. But they're not going to be as heavily regulated or as heavily paid attention to as if you're going to be a larger corporation, let's say. Okay. You also have a sense of personal freedom because you get to be your boss. Instead of working for the man, you get to be the man. That can also be a problem. Now, this is where we get to the disadvantages of sole proprietorship. One of the biggest ones is that you have unlimited liability. You and the business are the same thing. Okay? So if the business goes under and the business is in debt, guess who owes the money? You do. You can't pawn it off on the business and say that, well, that $50,000 in business that belongs to somebody else or just goes away now. No. You are personally liable for it, and your personal assets could be at risk, could be at stake because of this. Or if somebody sues the business, they're suing you directly. So you have unlimited liability. You also have a little bit more difficulty starting the business because it's just you putting money in, and if you need to borrow money from a bank, they're only going to allow you to borrow so much money. Okay, so you only have so much startup capital that you can work with in order to get the business off the ground and up and running. You have limited resources available to you in all sorts of ways, not just as far as money goes, but let's say knowledge, skills, equipment. There's only you, so there's only so much that you're able to do. You can only offer so much to your employees if you have them also, right? Small businesses can't go offering health insurance and life insurance and stock options and stuff like that, like a bigger business would be able to. Okay, there's a limited life. The business will last only as long as you decide to have it last, or maybe as long as you actually last in a literal sense. Let's say that you decide you don't want to do it anymore, well, then the business goes under. The business ceases to exist. Or let's say that you die unexpectedly. That happens sometimes. Well, not you personally. You haven't. That hasn't happened. I'm presuming that hasn't happened to you yet, but it happens to businesses sometimes where the owner dies unexpectedly, and if the heirs don't want to carry on the business, then the business is gone. Okay? There's also an inefficiency that's involved because if you're the boss and you're the only owner, all of a sudden you're responsible for doing a lot of stuff. Not only that, but all the decision making is on you because you're your own boss now, so that means you got to be the boss. You can't look to anybody else to make the decisions, especially the big ones. But this also means you're stretched in many different ways trying to run the business. You also have limited managerial experience, potentially, right? So let's say you're really good at baking, and so all of your friends say, you should open up a bakery. And you take their advice, and you open up the bakery, and it turns out you are really good at baking, but you stink at business. Well, what's going to happen to the business? It's probably going to go under, right? Or at the very least, it will suffer. So if you have limited experience managing a business, not just in terms of employees, but in running the business itself, take care of the accounting and the books and all this stuff, then you could run into problems. Right? If you've ever known anybody who runs a small business, or if your parents run a small business, you know that they work their tails off most likely. And the reason for this is that this is their livelihood, right? So if the business goes under, that means they lose their business. They lose their livelihood. They could potentially lose their shirt and their house and everything else. Okay? So they have to take a little bit more seriously. It's not going to be like another business where if it goes under, they can just take a job somewhere else and it'll be all right. Okay, so this limited managerial experience means that your boss may still be an idiot, because you're the boss, and if you don't know what you're doing, then you can wind up having problems. So this graphic right here just shows you some of the advantages and limitations. All the stuff we just talked about being easy to start and all that. Limited capital, limited size, etc. This shows you the size of proprietorships, so you'll notice that the majority of them are relatively small. Sometimes these could be side hustles. If you know anybody who has a side business where they got a day job, or they sell things on, I don't know, Etsy, or they work for Uber or something like that on the side. All right, so partnership, that'll come up next. We're going to stop it right there.